Here are 4 pictures. Take a guess. Which one is a wireframe? If you picked A, C, or D, you're right. But if you picked B, that is the final website. If your wireframe looked this polished, you're probably AI. You're going to learn how to create a strong website wireframe step by step. A wireframe is an outline of a digital product. It shows the structure, layout, and content hierarchy without the final visuals like fonts, colors, or graphics. A good wireframe should make it obvious what goes on the page, in what order, and why a visitor should care. If you skip wireframing and jump straight into high-fidelity design, it's like building a house without a blueprint. It might feel faster in the beginning, but it always backfires. In the AI era, wireframing matters even more. AI can generate decent-looking websites in minutes. But without a strong structure, you end up with something that looks good, but doesn't perform. Hey, I'm Aliena. I'll be using Wix Studio today so we can start from responsive wireframe templates and quickly turn the wireframe into a working website in the same tool. The link to Wix Studio is in the description. Please follow along. If you are using a different tool, the overall concept is still the same. This is the Wix Studio canvas, and here's a quick overview. To add any elements, go to the left panel and click the plus icon. Here you'll find many elements you can add to your design. For wireframing, we mostly use the first 4 elements. These are images, titles, paragraph, and button. Wix Studio also provides wireframe templates. If you click here, you'll see templates for different sections of a website. To add a template to your design, just click it. Ta-da! Now we just added a template to our design. This middle area is your canvas, where you design your website. You can click on any element to make quick changes, like editing the text. Once an element is selected, you can use the settings panel on the right to make more detailed adjustments, like changing the color and spacing. At the top, you can switch between desktop, tablet, and mobile to design your site for different device sizes. It's very important to make sure your site looks good on mobile because most people visit websites from their phones today. If most of your audience will be on mobile, you can start designing the mobile view first. This approach is called mobile-first design. To structure the web page, all you need to do is choose the sections that feel closest to your ideal design. For example, I've already selected the hero section here. Next, we can also add a card section to introduce our service. After this, we can also add a spotlight section, add a text section, and so on. After you added all the sections, go to the layers panel. You can drag these sections around to rearrange the order however you like. Something like this makes more sense. After this, you can start editing each section by updating the text, rearranging the layout, adding new elements, or adjusting smaller details. The editing workflow is very similar to what you would do in any design tool, but keep this in mind. In Wix Studio and most modern web builders, changes made on a larger device will also affect smaller devices. If I add a paragraph here on the desktop view, that element will also appear on the tablet and mobile views. But the opposite is not true. If I make a change on a smaller view, it will not affect the larger ones. Here, if I change the paragraph text on the mobile view and then switch back to desktop, you'll see that the desktop version stays the same. So remember this simple rule. If you want a change to apply across all devices, first add it on the desktop view, and then adjust for tablet, and then adjust for mobile. If you haven't tried using Wix Studio wireframe templates before, this is a good moment to pause the video and give it a try. Once you have a bit of fun exploring, come back here because the next few chapters are where most designers struggle. Dropping a few templates on the page, that is the easy part. The real value is figuring out what section the page needs, how to order them, how to write the right content, and how to come up with strong visual ideas so the page works the way you want. If there's one chapter you must not skip, it's this one. Many people think web design is visual design. That is a big trap. I learned this the hard way. Web design is so much about marketing and sales. Visual design is important, but it's not going to add value if your messaging is crap. And not every designer gets to work with a great marketing expert, unfortunately. Many times, your client isn't even sure what they want the landing page to do. So here's my tip, take note. Write a document that clarifies just these 6 things, and your web structure will become so much easier to design. These are who the page is for, that is the target audience. What problem they're facing, that's the user's pain point. What transformation you promise if someone uses your product, that is the value proposition. What your solution to the problem is, that is your product or service. Why people should trust you, that is your trust signals. And what is one immediate action you want the audience to take? That is your call to action. A landing page is really just a conversion funnel. There's one main call to action button, and everything else on the page exists to convince the visitor to click that button. This is my one-pager, and I use AI to help me get here faster. Faster, but it still took a few hours, so set the expectation right. And this step used to require a lot of business knowledge that many designers didn't have. But now we have free AI tools, so there's really no excuse here. Be open-minded and use these AI tools to your advantage. You can try ChatGPT, Cloud, Gemini, doesn't matter. I went through a lot of iterations to get here. And if you're designing for a client, the key here is to have an in-depth discussion with your client and then draft this one-pager together. At the end of the day, it is their product, not yours. I'll refer back to these 6 things throughout the later chapters, so it's really important you don't skip this step. By this point, you may already have ideas on how you want to design your wireframe. You can write down your ideas or draw them out to keep a record. But before we pivot, let's do some competitive analysis and gather design inspiration. There's a quote I love from Steal Like an Artist, and that is, if someone accuses you of plagiarism, it probably means you didn't steal enough. In other words, look at lots of examples, not just a few. And you shall at least research these 2 types of websites. First, companies that build products similar to yours. These are your direct competitors. You want your product to look very different from theirs, but you can definitely learn from what works on their website. Second, websites that have a good visual style or tone that you really like. These can be websites in a completely different industry. Maybe you love the typography, maybe you love the little cat there, maybe you love the vibe. Those are all great references. And when you find these examples, take screenshots, save the links, or keep the tabs open just like me. Next, we're going to visualize your ideas. In this step, we're going to come up with multiple wireframe ideas based on inspirations from the last chapter. Design is an iterative process between divergent and convergent thinking. And one very common mistake you can make is just converging too fast. That is when you lock into the first idea you have. It is probably not the best idea. So the key right now is to diverge first, and there's this rule you have to follow. Don't judge your ideas during ideation. Everything is yes and. Ideation is about quantity, not quality. You want to generate as many ideas as possible before choosing which one to develop further. And here are a few ways I like to capture ideas fast without getting into the technical details. The first way is just writing things down in text. I will list the section name and maybe describe it a little bit if it's too complex. Here are some examples. And here's another way, which I love, and this is using pen and paper. I use boxes to represent sections, images, or buttons, and I use lines or text to represent text. You can also annotate your ideas. And these sketches don't need to be pretty. The goal is to visualize fast. And I have to admit that even these are the beautified version. This is what my wireframe looked like in the beginning. It's not pretty, but drawing them all just feels so satisfying. Once you have a few promising ideas, we can move to the next step and start turning them into actual wireframes. Now that you have many ideas, select 1 to 3 ideas that you think are the strongest. Let's bring your ideas to the screen. When you bring your ideas to the screen, you may encounter some friction, and that is so normal. Many times, an idea can sound so good in your mind, but it can look horrible on the screen. And sometimes the big picture sounds right, but then without the text, it just doesn't make sense. So here are some of my tips to make this visualization step easier for you. When you're browsing the wireframe templates in Wix Studio, if you found one that represents your idea about 80%, I recommend starting from that template instead of building everything from scratch. Because these templates are already responsive, editing them will be faster than rebuilding it yourself. Another habit is to use existing styles without too much overriding. If a text looks too large, instead of manually changing the font size each time, go to the Style panel and choose one of the predefined styles that is similar. If none of the styles match what you need, you can manually edit the element once and then update the style so you can reuse it throughout the page. Later, when you turn this wireframe into a high-fidelity design, you only need to change the style once instead of fixing everything element by element. When it comes to landing page design, a large part of the work is in the writing, especially if you don't have a great marketing person to collaborate with. I spent around 80% of my effort literally just writing the text. And here are the texts you cannot ignore in a wireframe. Everything in the hero section, you cannot ignore. That's the top part of the website. Every single visitor will read your hero, so it has to be well written. And if this one is not done well, none of the other parts will matter. Next is every single heading. People don't read, we scan, and we pay attention to highlighted content. So your highlighted content needs to be really clear, because that is exactly what your visitors will read and remember. So write them out, don't skip them. For the rest of the content, if you don't want to write the exact copy yet, you can write a placeholder that describes the idea. But make it clear that this is a description, not the actual content. I don't suggest using lorem ipsum, which is this gibberish placeholder text, because then you cannot clearly communicate what the text actually is supposed to say. And you may ask, but I'm a designer? I didn't major in English. How am I supposed to write these texts? Well, if you didn't skip any chapter in this video, then you already know. The short answer is use the one-pager you created earlier, plus your brain, plus any of these AI tools to come up with some ideas. And then iterate to get to a text that is strong in clarity, trust building, and branding. Now let's focus on visual elements. You may be surprised by how simply you can represent them in a wireframe. You can just use a placeholder image and then write a text annotation on top. That's it. You can do this for images, videos, icons, even animations you have in mind. Just describe what you want this to be. And make sure these annotations are clearly shown as annotation, not real copy text. I like to put my annotations inside brackets, and I also like to use a lighter gray color so it's obvious that this is just a note. When you add elements to your wireframe, I highly recommend keeping them at the same level of fidelity. If you mix high fidelity design with a low fidelity layout, it can really confuse people because our brains automatically focus on polished elements. So I prefer to keep everything in grayscale to see the actual weight of different sections. If I want to highlight something, I might underline the text, I may bold the text, or using black color or darker color, but I will not introduce a whole new color. And I know for images, there are so many AI tools out there and you might want to just generate an image. I personally wouldn't do that because then you introduce something in a much higher fidelity and everyone's attention is on the image. I personally would still prefer just using the placeholder, even just a gray box or placeholder image, and write a description on top of it. But sometimes I will use emoji, sometimes I will use Google material icons. When you build your wireframe, new ideas will appear along the way, and that is awesome. And when this happens, you can just duplicate the page and then experiment with a new idea there. This allows you to keep your original version while experimenting with another direction. It is so common to have 10 wireframe versions before deciding on just one. And that is exactly why we need wireframing. These low-fidelity wireframes are easy to change, easy to explore, and it hurts less if someone roasts your design. If you jump straight into high-fidelity design, you realize that changing something takes forever. And you'll be so pissed if your client comes to you and then say that they don't like the overall structure, because even just getting the spacing right took you a whole afternoon. These days, I often design alongside an AI assistant like ChatGPT. I take a lot of screenshots and then I ask my AI assistant for feedback, and it helps. I know a lot of designers are doing this today. Feel free to take advantage of this timing because these AI tools are competing with each other right now, so the price will be the lowest of all time, and most of them are free. But, AI feedback does not equal to human feedback. When you launch your website, you're mostly still launching it to real people, right? So it is really important to get feedback from potential users early on. And I cannot believe I'm saying this. It sounds a little bit dystopian, isn't it? Get feedback from real people. I like to just bring to one of my friends for feedback. This was the version I shared with my friend, and you can see that it wasn't perfect at all. It wasn't even responsive yet, but I brought it to them anyways to ask for feedback, and then she helped me so much. She told me that my storytelling was too long, some trust-building sections were introduced way too late, and a few parts were just too text-heavy. And just that one conversation helped me to move from one version to another version so quickly, and it was an instant glow-up. And if you're designing for a client, then feedback can be a little bit tricky because you might sign an NDA that limits how much feedback you can ask for. So you need to negotiate with your client early on. And if you cannot ask people outside of your company for feedback, then the best option is to get feedback from internal team members. Sometimes, a client may not really understand what a wireframe is, and this happened to me, and they might think that sketchy layout you did, that's your design skill. And that was a little bit terrifying. So it's also really important to set the right expectation. Communicate early that this is a wireframe, this is not a final design. Most of the clients I work with, if they have some product building background, they will understand. But if they don't, then it could be worth to polish up your wireframe a bit more before presenting to them. After all the iteration, this is the final wireframe I landed on. There were many versions before this, but this is the one I will be comfortable presenting to a client. There are a few ways to evaluate whether your wireframe is ready. If you're working with a client, then if you two are aligned, the wireframe is ready. If you're working on your own product, then if your potential buyer says that the structure is clear enough, the messaging makes sense, and the main call to action is obvious, then I think your wireframe is ready. Again, your wireframe doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to answer the bigger question before you invest time polishing the details. And honestly, this process was really fun. I transitioned my career from software engineering to product design because I love this creative process, and sometimes I take it for granted. So this is just a kind reminder to you that we get to do this. Keep the creative spark, put on your favorite playlist, cut a bowl of fruit, and enjoy every step of the way. If you want to learn how to make a sitemap for designing a more complex website, comment sitemap. If you want to learn how to take a website wireframe to a high-fidelity, epic website, comment high-fi. Or if you want to learn anything else, just let me know in the comments. My name is Aliena. I make videos about design, tech, and business. So if you like that, subscribe, turn on all notifications. I also run a Figma trusted design bootcamp called Fast Track UX, where I help designers land good paying job in tech. If you are interested in that, check it out. And I want to thank Wix Studio for trusting me and making this video possible for you to watch for free. The link to Wix Studio is in the description. Go try it out. If you like this video, you also like this one, so I will see you there. Bye!
所以打扰你，你知道我那带网线你放哪去？
If you want to change, if you want, okay, I get this. It's just really, it just doesn't look